So this is the lesson for 8-1. What we're dealing with today is volume of cylinders. The formula for volume of a cylinder is volume, V, equals pi r squared h. The R stands for radius, which we'll talk about in a second, and the H stands for the height. Now, what the heck is a cylinder? A cylinder is a can. Think about a can of corn, a soda can, a can of tuna fish, all right? Any type of cylindrical can like that that has a circle at the top, a circle at the bottom, and then some sort of length to it. So when we're talking about these, we have the symbol pi. All right, the symbol pi, there is a pi button on the calculator. If you're using one of these type calculators, all right, the pi button is the fourth button down on the left-hand side. All right, that's your pi button. If you are using a phone, all right, remember that if you open up a calculator on the phone and you just have your calculator the normal way, you won't see the pi button at all. But if you turn your calculator sideways, some people have it on auto to flip to a scientific calculator. I don't, so I have to hit a button. But then remember that it changes to a scientific calculator. This is where you will find the pi symbol on your calculator. My pi symbol happens to be down at the bottom. All right, but every calculator is going to be slightly different where they put that pi symbol. Now, you might not also see a pi symbol. Instead of a pi button, you might just see the letters PI. It might be a capital P and a lowercase I, or a lowercase p and a lowercase I. But that might be your pi symbol on your calculator. Every calculator is a little bit different. If you don't have a calculator that has a pi button on it, you need to use 3.1416 for pi. Don't use just 3.14. The reason why not is because you're going to have to be rounding some of your answers to the nearest tenth. And if you use 3.14, you might not always get the correct answer. So you need to use at least 3.1416. The easiest way is to just use the pi button, all right, on your calculator if you have one. Now, you're going to have answers that you're going to get answers like 15 pi. In Classkick, instead of using the pi symbol, because there is no pi symbol on your keyboard, all right, you're going to type in 15 and then pi. That's how you're going to put your answer for when you have to leave it in terms of pi. Some answers, half the answers, you'll have to round to the nearest tenth. Half the answers, you'll have to leave it in terms of pi. When you leave it in terms of pi, you're just going to write 15 pi, no space in between the 5 and the p, or the 5 and the pi symbol. Now, what is 15 pi really? This is really 15 times pi. Don't type in the pi, don't type in the times symbol though. Just leave it as 15 pi. So 15 pi is really the number 47.1238898, blah, blah, blah. Pi goes on forever. It is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. It goes on forever. 20.4 pi, or 20.4 pi, would really be 64 and a whole bunch of decimals after it. 0884901. And again, it just keeps on going on and on and on forever. So you will need to round some of your answers to the nearest tenth. So remember that the tenths place is the first number after your decimal point. So if we're going to look at this first number, 23.4671352, which are answers that you will get in this section, you need to round your answers to the nearest tenth. The tenths place is the first place after the decimal point, so it's the 4. You need to look at the number that's after that 4. If this number after the 4 is 5 or higher, you need to round this number up. So this would round to the nearest tenth. This would round to 23.5. In the middle one, 47.1347975, If we're going to round this to the nearest tenth, the 1 is in the tens place. We have to look at the number after it. If the number after it is 4 or lower, this 1 stays the same. It does not round down. There is no such thing in math as rounding down. That 1 stays the same. So this would stay 47.1. You need to be careful here when you have a 9. If we had the number 25.983, blah, 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 the 9 is in the tens place. You have to look at the number after it. This number after it is 5 or higher. So this 9 rounds up. Now, don't do something silly and put 25.10 for 10, all right? 9 does round to 10, but what happens is this rounds to be 26 or 26.0. This 9 rounds to a 10, but we have to add 1 to the 5, so that becomes a 6. So you could either write 26 or 26.0. Either answer would be fine. So you have to know the difference, and you probably know this already from previous years. You have to know the difference between radius and diameter. The radius goes halfway across the circle. Now, it goes from the center of the circle out towards one of the edges. Now, most of the time you'll see it go off to the right, but it could go off to the left. It could go at some weird angle. It could go straight up. It could go down this way. It could go down this way. All right. But whatever way we're doing it, we're going from the center to the edge of the circle. The radius goes halfway across the circle. The diameter, on the other hand, goes all the way across the circle. It goes through this center piece, through the center of the circle, but it goes all the way across the circle. Now, most of the time you'll see it go left to right, just like this, but it could go up and down. It could go at some weird diagonal, as long as it goes through the center of the circle and touches both ends of the circle. So it goes all the way across. Sometimes you'll be given the diameter to try and trick you. Diameter is not in any of the formulas that we have in this chapter. So you will always have to find the radius if you're given the diameter. The way that you find the radius, if you're given the diameter, is to divide it by 2. So if we are given the diameter of 12, like we are here, the diameter goes all the way across, that's 12. We want the radius. Well, what you would have to do is 12 divided by 2, because remember the radius is half of the diameter. Or you could multiply it by 0.5 if you wanted to do that as well. So if the diameter is 12, that means the radius is 6, because the radius is half of the diameter. You will have some decimals as well. You'll have lots of decimals in this chapter. So if the diameter is 4.5, that goes all the way across the circle, and we wanted to find the radius, we would have to do 4.5 divided by 2. 4.5 divided by 2 is 2.25. So again, you will have some decimals in this chapter. So this is a typical problem that you have today. Half the problems today you will have to round to the nearest tenth, and half of the questions you will have to leave it in terms of pi. So let me show you the difference and how to do this. First of all, this is a picture of a cylinder. Again, think about a can of soup, a can of dog food, a can of cat food, a can of tuna fish. All right, those are all cylinders. So we have a circle on the top, we have a circle on the bottom, and then we have some height to it. So first of all, the formula, volume equals pi r squared h. Remember, this is really pi times r squared times h. They just don't put the dots or the time signs in it. So first thing we need to do is identify your parts and your pieces. Is the 6 the radius or is the 6 the height? Well, we're looking at this circle at the top. All right, it looks like an oval, but that's just the angle that we're looking at. So that is a circle at the top. So that's where we're going to find our radius. You always find your radius on that circle somewhere. So the 6 goes halfway across. Notice it goes from the center to the edge. So 6 is our radius. That means the 11, this distance right here, this 11 is our height. That's how tall the can or the cylinder is. So when we go to figure out the volume, if we were figuring it out to be to the nearest tenth, all that you're going to do is sub the numbers into the formula where they belong. So we have the pi symbol. Remember, if you don't have a pi button on your calculator, it's really 3.1416 times the radius squared, so 6 squared, times your height, which is 11. All that you're going to do is type this right into the calculator. All right, type that right into the calculator exactly how it is. Pi button times 6 squared times 11. Or if you don't have a calculator with a pi button, 3.1416 times 6 squared times 11. You're going to get big long decimals in this chapter. You're going to get a lot of them because of that pi symbol. So you get 1,244.070691, blah, blah, blah. These three little dots at the end mean that it keeps on going. So you're going to have to round it to the nearest tenth. If we go to round this to the nearest tenth, the 0 is in the tenths place. So we have to look at the number after it. That number after it is 5 or higher. So if we were rounding to the nearest tenth, your final answer on this one would be 1,244.1. That is the number that you would type into ClassKick. Now, half of your questions today, you will have to leave it in terms of pi. If we are going to leave our answer in terms of pi, what you're going to do is you're going to type in everything except for the pi symbol. Leaving an answer in terms of pi means that you're going to get answers that look like this. You're going to get 15 pi or 15 pi, pi. So when we go to do this, you're going to type in everything except for the pi symbol into the calculator. So what we're going to type in here is 6 squared times 11. Yes, there is that pi symbol there, but we're not going to type it into the calculator. What you're going to type into the calculator is 6 squared times 11. 6 squared times 11 is 396. And then all that you're going to do is stick this pi symbol at the end. I know that the pi symbol is at the beginning of the formula, but when you type your final answer, the number comes first, and then you have your pi symbol at the end. So our final answer here is 396 pi. In ClassKick, you would type this in as 396 pi. Lowercase p, lowercase I, no spaces in between. So if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, you type in everything, including the pi symbol, into the calculator, and then round to the nearest tenth. If we're leaving our answer in terms of pi, you're going to type in everything except for the pi symbol, and then stick that pi symbol just at the end. Don't accidentally type in the pi symbol into your calculator because you'll get the wrong answer. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. Now, this one's trying to trick you a little bit, right? Think about a can of corn or a can of soup that's knocked over. That's all that this is here. So 16 is still really our height, and 7.5 is still our radius. Again, remember that the radius is always part of the circle. Here's your circle right here. That is 7.5 is going halfway across the circle. Go ahead and try this one, please. Find your answer rounding to the nearest tenth and in terms of pi. Go ahead and try this, please. So if we were rounding to the nearest tenth, we would have pi, or 3.1416, times the radius squared, which is 7.5 squared, times the height, which is 16. So typing that into the calculator exactly how it is. All right, 7 pi times 7.5 squared times 16. You really get a big long decimal answer, 2,827.433388 dot 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 at the end. You want to round it to the nearest tenth. So the 4 is in the tenths place. We need to look at the number after it. That number after it is 4 or lower. So this 4 is going to stay the same. So if we were rounding to the nearest tenth, we would have 2,827.4. If we were leaving it in terms of pi, we would still have pi times 7.5 squared times 16, except this time, what you're going to do is just type this part into the calculator, 7.5 squared times 16, you get 900. And then all that you're going to do is stick your pi symbol in at the end. So our final answer would be 900 pi, or 900 pi. Now they are going to try and trick you a little bit. The one big way that they are going to try and trick you, notice in this problem, we are not given the radius. We are given the diameter. The diameter goes all the way across this circle. 3 is our diameter. Well, if 3 is our diameter, we need to find our radius. The radius is half of the diameter. So just take your diameter and divide by 2. So we really want to use 1.5 for our radius, because 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. 6.5 is our height. So we're going to take and sub in our numbers. Pi, or 3.1416, times your radius squared, which is 1.5 squared, times your height of 6.5. So you're going to take that and type it exactly how it is into the calculator. When you do that, you get 45.945,792.56, blah, blah, blah at the end. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. The 9 is in the 10th spot. We want to look at the number after it. That number after it is 4 or lower. So this 9 stays the same. So we have 45.9. If we are going to leave our answer in terms of pi, we would have pi times 1.5 squared times 6.5. Again, when you leave it in terms of pi, you type everything in except for the pi symbol. So we're just going to type into the calculator 1.5 squared times 6.5. You get 14.625. Don't round, all right? This is the only kind that you round. 14.625 pi, or 14.625 and then the letters pi after it. Go ahead and try this one, please. Go ahead and try this one, please. Find it both ways, rounding your answer to the nearest tenth and leaving it in terms of pi. So in this one again, your circle is down here at the bottom this time. They're giving you this distance that goes all the way across that circle. So 4.5 is really your diameter. We never want the diameter, we want the radius. The radius is half of the diameter. So 4.5 divided by 2 gives you 2.25 for your radius. 1.5 is this distance, which is your height. So rounding to the nearest tenth, we would have pi, or 3.1416 times r squared, which is 2.25, times your height, which is 1.5. Type that all right into the calculator, all three things. When you do that, you get 23.856, 46921, blah, blah, blah. Rounding to the nearest tenth. The 8 is in the 10th spot. You need to look at the number after it. That is 5 or higher. So this rounds up to be 23.9. If we are going to leave it in terms of pi, you would have pi times 2.25 squared times 1.5. But remember, if you're leaving it in terms of pi, you type in everything except for the pi symbol. So 2.25 squared times 1.5, you get 7.59375 pi, or 7.59375, and then the letters P I for pi. So that was one type of question where they give you the picture. The other type of question that they're going to give you is they won't give you a picture, but they'll give you the specific measurements. These questions are actually easier because you don't have to figure what piece is what. So if the radius is 6 and the height is 13.2, you would have pi times 6 squared, which is our radius, times our height, which is 13.2. If we were rounding to the nearest tenth in this one, you'd have 1,492.884829. Rounding to the nearest tenth, the 8 is in the 10th spot. You have to look at the number after it. So it'd be 1,492.9 if we were rounding to the nearest tenth. If we were putting it in terms of pi, you would just type in 6 squared times 13.2, which gives you 475.2 pi, or pi after it at the end. Again, sometimes they'll give you the diameter. Never, ever, ever do you ever want the diameter. You always want the radius. The radius is half of the diameter. So 16 divided by 2 gives you 8 as the radius. You would take that and use that in the formula. Same thing here with diameter. All right, you never want the diameter, you want the radius. So 12.3 divided by 2 is 6.15. You would be using 6.15 for your radius here. If we were going to actually solve this middle one, we would have pi times 8 squared times 20. If we were rounding to the nearest tenth, type that whole thing into the calculator. You get 4,021.238597, which rounded to the nearest tenth. 2's in the tenths place. You'd have to look at the number after it. That's 4 or lower. So this would be 4,021.2. If we were putting it in terms of pi, we would have 8 squared times 20. 8 squared times 20 is 1,280. And then stick your pi symbol at the end. So that is what your questions look like today. Again, be very careful whether you are rounding to the nearest tenth or leaving your answer in terms of